Hi everybody, and welcome to another installment of 10 Minutes To. This is the video series by your new college research advancement team to give you tips and tricks that we can present to you in 10 slides or less and in 10 minutes or less. And so without further ado, I'll jump to our PowerPoint presentation and share the screen with you. So today's topic is creating your 5-year plan. And this is a companion presentation to another of our short videos entitled Funding Your Work Through Multiple Agencies or Foundations. A quick note or a caveat, if you will, I'm creating this video while I'm quarantined at home during COVID. So please excuse the homegrown graphics and recording. I'm using your standard Zoom and PowerPoint for this today. All right. So you've been hired for a job. Yay! And your career trajectory looks something like this arrow, which is moving from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. You're familiar with this blue arrow if you've seen the companion presentation. The end point of this arrow for most new hires is the tenure process. Most new hires aren't thinking beyond that tenure point. They just want to get to and through tenure. So another yay. What I want to talk about today is what happens in between these 2 points here. How do you get from point A to point B in this arrow, and hopefully beyond. Hopefully you're not thinking about just getting to tenure, but how you're going to move through tenure and keep on an upward trajectory beyond that point. So this might represent your career trajectory here. You've got a primary axis that we drew in that first arrow, and this is your trajectory moving upwards from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, and each of these little dots represents a milestone for you. It might be a publication or a grant submission or a grant getting received. So I didn't use the size of the dots here to indicate a particular value to these milestones. They're just milestones along the way. And so as you're moving up your trajectory, you might have these side offshoots that represent side projects or new collaborations that you're starting with wins along the way there with these milestones. You might even find that one of these trajectories proves really fruitful, and all of a sudden you have a new upward vertical here with lots of successes, lots of milestones along this vertical, and that is okay. This vertical may even prove to be more fruitful than the original vertical you thought you were on when you were hired. All of that is fine as long as you're moving onwards and upwards. And so if you think of these different verticals coming together in this sort of shrub of upward verticals here, this is all okay for your trajectory as long as you can encapsulate it in some kind of umbrella or some kind of summary that says, these are me. And I've used this fingerprint icon to represent these verticals, and these arrows represent a combination that is uniquely you, unique like your fingerprint. This is your unique research contribution to Arizona State University. So as long as you can encompass these verticals collectively under a structure that says, this is my research program and it fits together for these reasons. These arrows connect together and this all makes sense because, and I'm headed off into the future to do this, then all of this works just fine. And it's an ideal situation to find yourself because it provides a diversity of opportunities for you to chase to remain productive your path to tenure and beyond. What I want to avoid is this example here where you've got these milestones or particular wins happening kind of over the place, not necessarily on a particular vertical. And your path between those milestones looks a little something like this. It's twisty and twirly and you don't know quite where you're headed and you're spinning around at certain points and you head off moving off at this right angle to your initial trajectory initially. This can be problematic, and the opportunity for tenure might seem very elusive at that point because you can't necessarily unify all of your projects that you've been accomplishing over this time on this very twisting and path, right? So how do we avoid the twisty and turny path, and how do we get nice verticals that are off into the right direction? And the way that I recommend this to folks, think about your time in terms of a 5-year plan. And this is a Google worksheet. Again, you've seen page 2 of this worksheet if you've joined in the companion presentation on finding multiple sponsors for your research. If you haven't seen that one, this is we have a link here to that worksheet where you can view it for yourself and download it, or you can recreate this very easily on your own. It's very straightforward. And you're not obviously constrained to this exact worksheet, but this is a style that works well for me. And what I want to point out here is that On your personal 5-year plan and timeline, I've actually got 4 years here because adding the 5th year made this so small it was actually impossible for you to read it. But if you look across these 4 years, I've color coded them by year, and then these are the months, January through December, within each year. Now, when you think about this in terms of short, medium, and long-term goals, you're going to have some very obvious short-term goals. So say you're coming in straight from your graduate degree or a postdoc, and you've got work you need to wrap up or work you did in your first summer. And so getting those papers published and out is obviously a short-term goal, and you want to make sure that happens pretty quickly. But when you're filling out this document, you actually want to jump here to your long-term goals first. This is where you want to start building your 5-year plan. So where do you want to be in 5-year plan in 5 years? So I've got here highlighted, I want to be ready to submit my 10-year package in year 5. I want to have everything ready to go at the end of year 5 and know that I have done everything that I could to get there. And what do I want the package to look like? Well, I would have liked to have gotten a grant successfully funded. My goal for myself is 10 papers published in journals that are respected in my field. Another goal is I have 2 new courses developed, which is not explicitly related to research, but they might bring out some of your research there. My research and my teaching often go hand in hand. I've included here that I want to serve as an officer in one of my societies. And again, that is really a service assignment, but your fellow members of your professional societies are not going to recognize you and nominate you to these positions unless you're at those societies and presenting recent and relevant research each year. So again, this is somewhat related to your research. And lastly, I want to have served on at least one important university committee. So those are my goals for getting tenure. And those are going to be spread across these 4 to 5 years right here. A lot of them may not happen until years 4 and 5. So they're going to be out here to the far right on this spreadsheet. But once I've populated these and figured out when I want to be doing these things, now I work backwards along this diagonal, back toward medium and short-term goals. And now I know where I need to be filling in individual papers and individual grant submissions to get to my goal of paper number 10 being published somewhere out here. So you can populate this over time. You can take an initial stab at this. You can revisit it quarterly or every 6 months or so to see how you're doing. This, again, is not a contract between yourself and this particular worksheet. This is a place for you to think and to imagine, and it's going to evolve over time. And you may have several versions of this as you find yourself heading off onto different trajectories and need an entirely new plan. But maybe you don't want to discard the old one because you want to remember where you've been. And some of the ideas there you may not want to completely throw out. This is a great thing about these digital worksheets is that you're unlimited in terms of the numbers of these you can create. Just save them somewhere that's useful for you and remember to revisit them. They're extremely handy when it's time for annual review or your mid-tenure review and steps like this. So a very simple approach to mapping out your 5-year plan and the milestones and goals you want to have met as you're heading into the tenure process. As you zoom in on this, you can begin to identify your short-term goals in terms of specific projects. So here's project 1, project 2, moving down the graph here. When you want to publish those, moving across this. And remember, you're going to be working up towards this particular corner, starting with your long-term goals and then reaching ultimately your most immediate goals. And setting these time frames here based upon how long it's going to take you to get to those long-term goals. So if you started here in this corner, you might think, I've got all year to get this first paper published. But by the time you've mapped out your long-term goals and realized how long it's going to take you to get there, you might realize I've only got 3 months to get this paper published and I need to get on it, okay? So this is a really handy way to put things into perspective. So that's all I have for this time. Thank you for joining us. As always, thank you. And any questions, I would love to hear from you. Any suggestions for future presentations that we can cover in under 10 slides in under 10 minutes, I would love to hear from you. Have a great one.